Hi, my name is Wes Overton, and today we are going over how to use the Desmos Teacher Dashboard to run Desmos Teacher activities. So one thing to keep in mind about the Desmos Teacher Dashboard is that it was designed with the 5 practices in mind. And if you are not familiar about the 5 practices, it is a book written called The 5 Practices for Orchestrating Productive Mathematical Discussions. And here is the cover of the original book. They've actually came out with a second edition, which here is the cover right here. But the 5 practices are anticipating, monitoring, selecting, sequencing, and connecting. And as we go through this video about the Desmos Teacher Dashboard, keep in mind how these 5 practices relate to the use of the teacher dashboard if you have read that book. So right here is a web address for a sample teacher dashboard that you can practice these skills on. So that is bit.ly. This is all one word here, but that is Desmos Sample Dashboard. So if you want, you can pause the video and go ahead and head there. That way you can practice these tools as you watch the video. Okay, so this is the screen that shows up when you first get there. So this is how students could enter the activity. They could go to student.desmos.com. They could type in the code. You also have the ability to generate a link that you can copy and paste in your learning management system, whether it's Google Classroom or something else. One thing I like to do personally is take that link, and I like to have a Google Doc each day. On that Google Doc, I'll put homework, I'll put when tests are upcoming, I'll put what we're doing that day, and then if we are doing a Desmos activity, I'll post those links, one for each period. So first period link, second period link, third period link, and so forth. That way if the students are out, they have all that information there for them, and they can access that activity if they would like. So when you close that, this is our teacher dashboard. So a couple things. If you want to display that code again, you simply click this and that code pops up right there. To the right is the ability to add a co-teacher. So maybe you have an inclusion teacher, you want to give them access to this teacher dashboard. You can do that right there. And then there's some options over here on the left and some options over here on the right. I'm going to go over these options on the left first. So the first thing we see is the ability to anonymize students. So once I activate that, the student's name changes to a famous mathematician. So I like that. Desmos is a math company, so they thought about that. So when you click that, the student's name changes to a famous mathematician. And a lot of times my students like to Google that person and maybe read about them, see what they did. But I like this feature as a teacher. If I ask students to maybe share something like an open-ended type question, students are a lot more likely to share if they know their responses are anonymized and we don't know whose is who. The other reason I like it as a teacher, as I'm reading responses that maybe I want to select and we want to talk about as a class, I don't have any biases towards that person. I'm just looking at what the content that they say. Now, the next option is the ability to pace. So that is to restrict students to either one slide or a group of slides. So I can click pacing. Maybe I just want them to go to slide 2. So I can click that and restrict to slide 2. That just brought all the students now should be on this one slide. I can go one slide at a time using the arrow. So this is moving student screens one slide at a time. I can open up a window. So now students have access to anywhere from slides 3, 4, or 5. I can stop pacing if I want. And then I want to show you one more way, a quick way to open up a window to students to go on. So you can click pacing, and then you can click the first slide you want them to be able to go to and the last slide, and then click restrict. So now students are restricted from slides 4 to 7. And then the last tool over here to the left is the ability to pause the class. So this is important for having those mathematical discussions. A lot of times students get engaged in the activities And this is a way where I can pause them, the screens turn black, and we can focus on the board and we can talk about something that we need to talk about, and then I can unpause them and let them continue on. And you will see right here, this is the ability to shuffle how the names are displayed. So I can shuffle by time. So this is the time the students entered the activity. I can shuffle by name. And this goes in alphabetical order by their first name if they type that in first. Or I can do a random shuffle. So that is beneficial if I'm selecting responses that I want to talk about as a class. Sometimes you get in the habit of only reading the responses at the top, and that shuffle allows the students at the top those responses to stay, and they keep changing the order. Now over here on the left you'll see 4 options: snapshot, summary, teacher, and student. We're going to do its own video on snapshots. That is a really neat tool, a really handy tool, and so it kind of deserves its own video. So first we have the summary tab, and this is the summary view, so I can see a lot of information at one time. You will notice there's different options on the summary view. There's a dot, a check, and an X. And we're going to talk about what each of those means. So a dot might be a slide where the students have an open-ended response. It might not be right or wrong. So maybe this dot tells me that student has at least answered that question. This student has not attempted that slide yet. Now, when you see a check and an X, those are slides that can either be right or wrong. So I can tell most students got this slide right. Maybe a couple students got this slide wrong, so maybe I could visit those students. If I see a lot of X's there, we could pause and talk about it as a whole class. Now, next we have the teacher view. So we're going to look at the teacher view for slide 1. So on this slide, students had to watch a video and make a story about what could happen. So this is what a free response type thing might look like in the teacher view. So I can see all the students' answers over here. The next, which is real handy, is to look at one, maybe they have to type an equation or a graph, and we're going to do that on slide 5. So I'm going to click slide 5. On this slide, students had to watch a video and make a graph. So over here on the right, I can see the different students' responses that they chose. If I want, I can click on one student. So maybe I want to talk about, I could pause the class and say, hey, let's talk about what this one student says. And it loads up, we could talk about that. I can adjust that student's slide, and it's not going to change his answer. It's only going to look at the class discussion. The next option we could look at over here, which is a very neat feature, is the class overlay. So if I click that, what's going to happen is all the students' graphs are going to show up on one graph. So now I can check and see if we have a good consensus, or maybe we need to pause and talk about this and see what's happening. But this is all the class's responses on one slide. And then the last tab we have up here is the student view. So what that does is that shows a blank slide that the students will first encounter. So this would be what the students would see when they first encounter a slide. So I could pause it, I could give them directions, I could call their attention to something. If I want to watch the video clip on there, we could pause it, I could go to the student view, and then I could show them that video clip. So the last thing we have to talk about is snapshots, and like I said, that is going to be its own video, but what we've talked about is how to display the class code, how to add a co-teacher, how to anonymize the class, how to paste the class, how to pause the class, how to change the order of the summary view for the teacher dashboard. We've talked about the advantages to the summary view, the advantages to the teacher view, and then the advantages to the student view. So hope you've enjoyed this, and then I hope you check out our next video on the Snapshot tool.